Hello ladies and gents, and welcome yet again to another episode of Dinner Guide. I am your host Chef Andy, and today I'm going to be making something that's a personal favorite. I'm going to be making a very simple egg and potato salad. But before I begin the very simple dish, we are going to begin by introducing the ingredients before us, just to give you an idea of what to expect for this particular show. Now from the very front, I've got one raw egg, and I've also got about 30 milliliters of vinegar. I've also got a pinch of salt there, about a teaspoon, and I've also got some fresh coriander leaves. I've also got some oregano that's dried, and I've also got a tablespoon of some dried sultanas. You'll also require a few stems of some fresh leeks and 2 hard-boiled eggs. You're also going to require a nice small handful of some oregano, a sprig of mint just to garnish with, a tablespoon of some mustard, and 1 whole green apple. You're also going to require about 5 pieces of potato, some fresh parsley there, some water which you're going to be cooking your potatoes in, some spring onion which you're also going to be incorporating into the dish, and last but not least, some oil and some black peppercorns to crush. Now we're going to take a short break now, allowing you to stretch and unwind, and we'll catch you after a very, very short break. Welcome back, viewers. If you're just tuning in, we're just about to start a very simple potato and egg salad. Now, before we get into this very simple process of preparing this very simple dish, I will remind you that you can actually substitute some potatoes for some baby potatoes if you can be able to find some at your regular retail stores. But if you can't be able to find some nice average size or small size potatoes will do for this recipe. I will also remind you that it is also a very, very common thing for some of us to purchase our mayonnaise, but on this particular episode, I will take you through the very simple technique of making your own mayonnaise from home. Now we're going to start the process by cooking our potatoes. So for that, you will require a pot of water. So I'm just going to pour that in here. And now, very important to mention, always very crucial to boil your potatoes from the beginning in some cold water. This allows for a nice even cooking process, and of course it will actually avoid for you it will actually avoid you from overcooking your potatoes. So I'm going to start off by allowing those to boil on the side, and while that continues, we're going to start the very simple process by soaking up our sultanas. So I'm just going to pour those into a bowl, and of course soak them in a bit of water. Remember, these are pretty much dehydrated fruits, so you do actually you do need to allow them a bit of time to sit in some cold water at room temperature. This will allow for them to really just puff up with a bit of energy, and they'll actually also look very, very nice on your plate. Another thing as well is because of the fact that they are very chewy when they're dry, this particular technique of soaking them allows them to be very, very tender and not so chewy. So this we are going to allow to sit just behind us here, and we're going to come back to add them into the dish a little later. But now, to start us off, I'm going to begin by making my mayonnaise. So very, very simple technique. To this small mixing bowl on the chopping board here, I'm going to add a teaspoon of some Dijon mustard. To that, I will also incorporate a bit of vinegar. And very, very simply, just going to proceed to whip that together, combining the vinegar and the mustard. And you can allow that to sit on the side very briefly. Next up, we'll proceed to separate our egg. So very, very simply, remember, all we need from this is our egg yolk. So very simply, while holding your fingers right over a bowl, proceed to crack open your egg and allow for all your egg white to pour out completely. And proceed to add your egg yolk to the bowl. And you can proceed to reserve that for any particular use, be it cooking or particularly adding that to mixtures. So you can actually reserve your egg white. This can actually be used in very, very, very many ways. So very simply, proceed to whip your egg yolk into the mixture. And once that's combined, we're going to proceed to add our oil. Now, very, very important to mention, when making mayonnaise, proceed to add your oil very, very slowly. So we're just going to allow that to pour into our bowl very, very slowly. And we're going to proceed to whip our mixture. And one particular thing to mention as well, particularly for those who may attempt to do this, be very, very wary about adding your oil too quickly. Remember, adding your oil too fast could actually split your mixture. And that will, of course, cost you a bit of money, and it actually will make you have to begin from start. So I'm just going to continue whipping that. It should actually start to cream in the first 2 minutes of your whipping. And it will actually continue to thicken as you proceed to add your oil. Now, something also to mention, particularly even for myself, I have tried on very many occasions to make mayonnaise from scratch. I will mention in the beginning stages, it could actually be very tricky for you to get it right. But I will mention, if you do actually take a bit of time to try it out, it will actually become a little easier as you proceed. And this particularly is a very, very good way of cutting costs, especially if you're trying to avoid using processed ingredients from your supermarkets. This particular method of making your own mayonnaise will actually save you quite a bit of money. And now, for those who may wonder what Dijon mustard I'm using English mustard for this particular recipe. And for the vinegar, you can also alternate between white wine, red wine, or just white vinegar. It will actually give you quite a bit of changes in regards to color and with texture, and as well with flavor. So you can actually take some time and really try them out, see the difference, and probably find your preference in the meantime. So just proceed to whip that. And now at this stage, I've used about 3/4 cup of oil. That, of course, has gone into the bowl with 1 whole egg yolk, a teaspoon of mustard, and a bit of some vinegar for those of you who are just tuning in. Now, this should actually take you anywhere between 4 to 6 minutes, making it in a small batch. Now just proceed to whip that through. Once you've got about a tablespoon, about half a cup to 3/4 cup mayonnaise, we're going to add a little bit more oil just to give it a bit of thickness. And while you continue whipping, we're also going to proceed to season our mayonnaise. So about 2 small pinches of some salt, and a small dash of some freshly crushed black peppercorns. And just proceed to whip that until it's fully combined. And now at this stage, you should have a nice, beautiful consistency of your mayonnaise. If I can be able to hold the bowl right at the front. You should actually be able to have a nice, beautiful, thick, runny mixture like so. And that will actually be able to coat your potatoes very, very nicely. And as you can see, these are the very, very prime particular checkpoints for good mayonnaise. Remember, it should actually be able to hold the creaminess really well. Should actually have a nice, beautiful touch of acidity to it from the vinegar. So very important, always make sure to taste for seasoning. Very, very good. Now we're just going to correct that with a bit of some salt and a bit of some black peppercorns, and just proceed to whip that just to give it a nice mix. And you can at this stage add a very, very small dash of vinegar, and this will actually kick in a bit of acidity, and it will also bring up the beautiful flavor of your mayonnaise. All right, so once that's done, very simply proceed to allow that to chill in your refrigerator until the point of serving. Right, so mayonnaise is done. First particular thing that should be on your to-do list. Now, second up, we're going to proceed to peel our cooked eggs. So, very simple technique of doing so. I like to use a spoon and I just proceed to tap my egg right around, allowing, of course, for the shell to detach itself from the egg. And once you've got your whole shell all crumbled up, we're going to proceed to just dig your spoon at an angle from one end of the egg. And all you're going to do at this stage is just proceed to slide your spoon right between the skin of the egg and the egg itself. And once you turn that open, should allow for you to get that shell out very, very simply. Now you can also proceed to just slide your spoon right around your egg, of course detaching that very thin skin of the egg from the egg itself, and you should actually be able to turn it out into a nice, beautiful, clean piece. And as you can see, that allows for you to actually keep the shell and the membrane quite intact. And you're going to proceed to do the same thing for the second piece. Now this process will also work very well for eggs that are left over in your refrigerator. But of course, always make sure to use your eggs closest to time. Proceed to do so, of course, making sure that your eggs have, of course, not been sitting in your refrigerator too long, because this could actually bring out a bit of poisoning, and it could actually give you a bit of a stomach upset. So be very, very cautious to make sure not to use eggs that have been sitting in your refrigerator for anywhere more than 2 days. Right, so eggs peeled. Just going to place those on a plate and proceed to discard the shells. Right, very important to make sure not to have any shells on your board while chopping any of your vegetables. So be sure to just turn your board around and you can proceed to use a cleaner surface. And now next up, we'll proceed to chop up our leeks. Now very, very simply, we're going to take off a bit of those very, very dark colored leaves from the sides, and of course proceed to use a nicer, more paler part of the leek. So this you can actually use for other reasons, for instance for making stock, so you can proceed to reserve those on the side. And very, very simply, we're going to proceed to slice those at an angle, proceeding to chop as thin as possible. And proceed to do the same for the rest of your onion. Right, nice, beautiful, even chopping there. So to that, we're just going to place those onto our plate. Remember, this whole mixture will be going into the bowl of mayonnaise that we did a little earlier. Right, once that's done, we're also going to proceed to chop up our apple. So very simply, just proceed to slice just off the center and proceed to reserve those beautiful wedges, and you can proceed to reserve the rest of your apple. And very simply, we're going to proceed to first slice that very thinly. Of course, making sure to look for nice, more even chopping right through. Now, one particular beautiful addition to your salad would be a bit of some fruit, especially with some nice, beautiful citrus fruits, or maybe some nice hard apples. This will particularly give it a nice, beautiful balance. It will also cut the richness of the mayonnaise, and it will also improve the outlook and the image of the dish. And now this we're just going to proceed to chop very finely. And for this particular process, you can also alternatively peel your apple if you're not a fan of having apple skin in your salad. But remember, a lot of nutrients do lie in the skin and the fruit, so be sure to always try and consume the skins of the apple. They do actually carry quite a beautiful bit of nutrient to them. Right, so apples onto the plate. Now we're also going to proceed to chop up our coriander. So I'm going to take off about a teaspoon, and of course chop that finely as well. We're going to also lay those very, very gently on a plate. Right, now, very simple technique of preparing your condiments for your salad. Now we're going to now allow those to sit on the side. We are going to come and combine the salad at the last and final part of the show. But in the meantime, we are going to give our potatoes a quick prick just to make sure they're almost cooked through. And this should be about anywhere between 4 and 6 minutes. We are going to take a short break, allowing them to cook fully. From there, we're going to allow them to cool off under some cold running water, which is of course at the sink behind me. And then we'll come to the last and final step, where basically we're going to move into plating this very simple dish. But before we do so, we'll allow you to take a very short break as we do ourselves, and we'll catch you after a very short break. See you in a little while. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. If you're just catching up with the show, we've just been boiling some potatoes, we made some mayonnaise, and we finished chopping up the ingredients for the last and final process of plating. So we're going to start this process by grabbing our potatoes. Remember this, we had boiled a little earlier. They've now cooled off. We drained them a little earlier, rinsed them under some cold running water. So these are now about ready to start going on to the plating. So we're going to start this process by simply chopping up our potatoes. So for this, I'm going to reserve about 3 potatoes for this recipe. So very simply, proceed by cutting ones halfway and proceed to cut into quarters. And proceed to do the same with the rest of your potatoes. Now this should not, of course, overcook. Very importantly, to make sure that your potatoes are still a little hard, but of course not raw. One particular good point to check with is using a sharp knife or using a fork. You should actually be able to dig right through to the centermost part of the potato and pull your fork out very, very simply. This will be the very most simple checkpoint for you to make sure that your potatoes are just perfectly cooked. Now next up, I'm going to grab the mayonnaise we did a little earlier. And now we're going to proceed to add our ingredients. So I'm going to start by adding our chopped apple, our chopped coriander, and some of the chopped leeks. So proceed to just add those into the bowl. And using a spoon, proceed to mix through. Alright, once that's mixed, we're going to proceed to add our egg. So very simply, I'm going to be using one of the eggs just to give the salad a bit of a texture. So I'm just going to grate that in. Of course, taking time to grate very, very gently to get a nice, more even consistency to your egg. Of course, very importantly, always remember to scrape off the back of your grater. I'll also proceed to drain off the water from the sultanas we had soaked in a little earlier. We'll allow those to drain off very, very simply. And now to this, I'm going to add a small pinch of some dried oregano. And I'll proceed to mix through. Right, now once that's mixed through, we'll proceed to add our potatoes. Proceed to also add your sultanas. And proceed to mix through, making sure to coat your potatoes in that beautiful mayonnaise and of course the other ingredients. And for those of you who may not also be able to find sultanas at your retail store, you should actually be able to find raisins, also a very good addition to this particular recipe. Right, now that's mixed through. I'm also going to proceed to just slice my egg into quarters. So I'm going to first slice it lengthways. And of course now we're at the last and final stage of plating. So I'm going to grab this nice beautiful plate which we're going to be serving our dish on. Alright, now to that we're going to begin by creating a base with a bit of some beautiful fresh rocket leaves. So I'm just going to spread those right at the center of the plate. Now these are particularly very, very good in flavor. They do carry a nice, beautiful texture to them, have a nice, beautiful flavor and a nice, beautiful pepperiness to them. This will basically just uplift the flavor of your potato salad. And right on top of that, we're going to proceed to plate our salad. Be sure, of course, to also give it a nice, beautiful height while you plate. Remember, this always accentuates the plating of your dish. Now, just to grab that little bit of mixture that's at the bottom of the bowl, be sure to always take your time to scrape out to the very bottom of your bowl, of course avoiding any waste. Simple as that. Now to that dish, we are going to very simply proceed to finish that off. So I'm going to begin by just placing some pieces of egg right around the plate. Remember, this just gives it a nice, beautiful visual appearance. And of course, I will proceed to add my mint leaf my sprig of mint right over the top. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my very simple take on a potato salad with egg. As I have mentioned as well, there are, of course, alternatives to using the leeks that we had used earlier. So for that, you can also use some of these beautiful spring onions. These carry quite a beautiful juice in them, and it really also brings out some beautiful flavor. You can also alternatively just proceed to tear up some fresh coriander and just sprinkle that right over the sides of your plate. And that will of course also bring up a nice beautiful visual appearance to your dish, and of course complement the flavor in general. So that, of course, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the last and final part of the show. This is my very simple take on a very simple potato and egg salad. I hope you've managed to grasp something that you can also improvise in your very own recipe at home. And I will also bid some of you to try it out. Do send us those comments. Do send us those nice, beautiful pictures you've been sending through. Do also keep tuning in, and there is plenty more that is in store for you. For those of you who may have missed out on the previous episodes, don't forget we do have our YouTube page, that's BrandPlus TV. You should be able to recap and catch up on what you have missed this far. But for this and more, I'm going to bid you farewell, wishing you a lovely, lovely, beautiful Easter holiday. God bless, and see you soon.